All right. I had an opportunity recently to put together a budget PC based on the PC build assignment that I give in my CIS 1410 class. Normally the budget's $900. In my case, I was trying to stick me somewhere between $750 and $800 because I'm reusing my keyboard, my mouse, my monitors, my sound system, my webcam, and my microphones. So I didn't really need to spend that extra money, and the budget that we had available was a little less than 800. So I wanted to try to keep it down into that range. I wanted to see what kind of a budget build PC that I could build that did a couple things. First of all, stayed within the budget, gave me a decent computer today with the ability to expand to a much more robust computer in the future. So what I want to do right now is just kind of walk through that process real quick. So the opportunity I had was, I had somebody near a Micro Center, and they were willing to stop by and pick up parts for me. So I I went online real quick. It probably took me 30 minutes to get through this whole process. I'm hoping I can explain it in 30 minutes. But I wanted to just kind of walk through what I did to make this happen. So I've already opened up, several web pages that I know I used that day to make this happen. So kind of recreate that process. So my first thing is I wanted to find quickly a processor, and I was, I've never built an AMD machine before. I usually always been an Intel, but the latest Ryzen and Threadrippers are really really nice and really high powered for the price. So I thought I'd make this build an AMD build. So my first thought was, what processor do I want to go with? So I pulled up CPU benchmarks, and I looked at the high-end processors, and simply just kind of scrolled down. And I'm not even worried about any of these other things at this point. What I'm looking for is something down at the 100 to 150 mark as far as a price is concerned. Okay. So getting close there, like 179 is a Threadripper, but a Threadripper, I think for a budget build, the Threadripper is going to ask, you're going to be needing too much, right? So that's the type of motherboard is going to be super expensive. So the Threadrippers aren't really a good choice. So I'm looking for the best priced CPU on the performance chart here. Again, and I think Threadrippers are going to be beyond a basic build. Here's one in the 160 range, the Ryzen 5 3600, so we're getting closer, but that's still a little rich. Like, I need to keep this price down. So 169, there's another Ryzen 7, there's another Threadripper there. So you can see there's some really good bargains for some of these processors when you compare them around the edges there. But so again, just kind of scooting down, hoping I don't miss. So 140. It says the Ryzen 5. So this right here, 140, 2600X. So that's a possibility. Can I get any cheaper? Here's a cheaper one. So Ryzen 2600. So 2600, and then there's a 2600X above. So this is, at 117.56. I think, hey, let me check that out. Let me do that one. All right. So that fits in the budget. So on Micro Center, if you go to computer parts, you can go to AMD processors here, and we are simply, actually we could have gone right here and looked up Ryzen 5 2600. All right, and so what we're seeing is, so here's a 2600, but it's a 2600X, and it's a whole lot less expensive than we anticipated. So if you remember from our chart over here, the Ryzen 2600X was, where's my 117? So here's the one I was looking for, and I remember the Ryzen, that other one being up a little bit higher at 140 right here. So better performance, 1446 versus 13477. So about 1,000 points difference on the scale here, and right, they have it at less money, so that's pretty good. So what I did do, I wanted to say, hey, am I making a mistake here? So I asked, what's the difference, right? what's the difference between these two? So right off the bat, they look, this one just looks more expensive. But if you read the little bit right down here, the 2600X, they're the same CPU. The difference is they got faster clock speeds on the 2600X, and they have a better stock cooler. So you get a better stock cooler and you get faster speeds. And if you want to overclock, they're saying use the X if you want to overclock. So let's say maybe I do want to overclock at a later point. This build won't handle an overclocking situation at this point, but so I'm thinking the 2600X is going to be the way to go. So let's grab, right, that fits my bill. It's $99 is super cheap. So let's do that. Let's add, we're going to add that to the cart. Okay, now that I've got my my Ryzen 2600, let's take a look at let's say motherboards, right? So that'll be the next piece of the puzzle here, right? The motherboard is going to be kind of the driving factor of what we can put in this computer. So real quick on the motherboard side, I like to do, let's say I want to only play with things that are 4 stars or better. We need to use an AM4 socket because that's the size, that's the socket type for my particular my AMD. And then down here I'm looking at the Northbridge, right? These are the chipsets factors. Actually, I'm going to put ATX down here as well. And then, all right, so I've got a B450, an X470, and an X570. So I'm like, oh, okay, what's the difference here, right? So I'm going to assume that 570 is better, but we don't know exactly. So I did do a search on the day when I was looking, and I found this article, list of AMD chipsets. This is a Wikipedia article, and I'm going to look at the AM4 chipsets specifically. And this gives me a nice chart. So this is showing you that the X570 came out July of last year, and the X470 came out over almost 2 years ago, and the B450 came out almost 2 years ago. So first of all, right off the bat, better, right? It's a newer release date. You're going to assume that it's a whole lot better than the other chips. And if we look at this right off the bat, the chipset lanes, there's actually, this has PCI 4.0, which is versus 2.0. So remember, if we go PCI Express speeds, right, so if we want to look at this real quick, just comparing speeds, the 2.0 goes at 5 gigs, gigatransfers, they call it, gigatransfers per second, or 500 megabytes per second, okay? And the 4.0 goes at 2 gigabytes, so it goes at 4 times the speed. Okay, so that's a huge difference. That in and of itself for me was the reason why I chose to go this route, no matter what. The other thing that was really interesting is that 570 and 470, I can do SLI, but the B450s, which are more cheaper motherboards, I can't do those. I can't use SLI. So if I wanted to use NVIDIA video cards, which is kind of sacrilege if you have an AMD system, but just in case, right? The other thing that was a big deal is I've got 3.2 Gen 2 USBs, right? So I've got 8 of those versus 2s. So I've got a significantly better USB bus, 12 SATA ports, right? So way better. I've got some of these new features, StoreMI and PBO, which StoreMI is like a accelerated storage, and then PBO is like a, I want to say it's like for overclocking, like performance stuff. So plus the fact that I can overclock. So I think if we compare these real quickly in this chart, I'm like 570. I want to go 570. So I'd like to see what kind of motherboards I can get for 570s. They tend to be expensive, right? So most of these expensive ones are 570s. So I'm hoping that I can find something in this realm that's less expensive. So I've chosen AMD 4 stars or better, X570, right? And then let's rank them by lowest price. All right, so now they're going to rank by lowest price. Look, there's a right off the bat, these first 3 right here, one from Gigabyte, one from ASRock, and one from ASUS. Those are all $150 or less, right? So then I could go up a couple dollars if I wanted to, but again, remember my goal is to kind of keep the price as low as possible. So let's just for fun, let's take let's grab those three and let's compare them real quick. So we're just going to grab these first three that are less than $150. If I look over here, I've got so my BIOS, I've got more memory available to my BIOS on these two. Power management, they got a bunch of different things going on, but ACPI is good. Yeah, those are fine. So X570s, AM4, Ryzen, they're all the same. My slots can handle 32 gigs. I can handle 3200, 3200, 3000. So these two have better memory. And then if I look at the overclocking ability, this one can have the highest level of overclocking at 4666. Right, so then I've got another check mark here. This can handle 128, that can handle 64, this can handle 128. So again, these two now have check marks, but this one in the middle. Like essentially, as I'm going through this real quickly, I'm like, this one has better process. You've got more memory up here. It's got it can go faster. It's got dual channel. I've got a share memory, so that means all three of these are going to require you to have the CPU with integrated graphics. And then this one can handle SLI, where these other two don't say it, right? So SLI. The other important factor I would look at is like this has one M2 slot, this has actually 3, and this one has 2. So, and then 8 SATA ports versus 6 and 6. So this one to me, hands down, of these 3 is going to be the best way to go, and that's the choice I made, was to go with this Phantom Gaming 4, right? So I'm just going to add that to the cart. So now I've got my motherboard, the Phantom 4. I've added my my processor. Let's see, this this motherboard can handle memory, 3200 memory without overclocking, right? So that's the fastest speed without overclocking. After that, I've got to overclock. So if I put in RAM at 3200, I'll be in good shape. So let's take a look at computer parts, and let's look at desktop memory. And that was weird. Let me do that again. All right, so desktop memory, let's remove all of these. Let's do the same thing. Let's say I want 4-star rated or better. And then I'm a fool for RGB. I love lights. I don't know why. All DDR4 is the only option we have. And let's because we're going cheap. Normally I would want 2 times 32s, or at least 132. But I'm going to go with 16 gigs. I'm going to do it in 2 8 gigs so that I can take advantage of the dual channel. All right. And then I think, so I can go 3200. So let's go 3200, right? Because that's the max memory that I can put in it without causing any problems. And then, like I've been doing before, let's go lowest price. And I've got some, I don't even know, I've heard of that brand. I've never seen it, never used it. I like Corsair brand. But I did get a good recommendation from a student in the past at a previous meeting that these G.Skill Tridents are nice. So these are 3200s. They've got really, it's a good looking. I like the look of this versus the look of this. I think, I don't know, just a look thing. So I think I'm going to do this one. Like, let's go with this one. So 2 times 8 is about, $6, what's that, $4 difference. I think we'll be all right with a $4 difference. Right, so I'm going to add that to the pile. All right, so now I've got my memory, I've got my motherboard, I've got my processor. I need some hard drives, right? So we went back to computer parts and went to internal hard drives. Let's get some solid states, right? So we can speed this thing up a little bit. And I want to, again, 4-star rated or better. And my capacity, I'm gonna get 500 gig hard drives, and I want to get 2 of them so that I can mirror my operating system. And then I will take the data drives that I have, which I have 3 1 terabyte drives. Actually, I have two 1 terabyte drives and a mirror for my data on my existing PC. So I'll take those out of there and drop those into this computer. So that I've got, so if I sorted them again by lowest price, we've got the Inland Professional versus Inland Premiums. And Inland, if you're not familiar with the Inland, is the store brand for Micro Center. So they do pretty good as far as standing behind their products. Let's go take a look at what these two, what's the difference between these two, because they're the same price, they give you the same amount of memory. So how do we choose between these two? So the Professional looks like Endurance, TBW, right? So the Endurance is better in the Professional. It looks like the read speed's a little bit faster, the write speed's a little bit faster. Oh, here's where your big difference is. Your random read IOPS, right? So your input-output is way better on the Professionals. Okay, if we scroll down, you can see they're both covered by a 3-year limited warranty, which is a good warranty. So let's click on Add to Cart. On the Professional, we're going to pick the Professional. I'm going to go back to the cart because I want to put 2 of these drives into this computer. Okay, so we'll put 2 here. All right, so at this point, right, I've got my processor, I've got my ATX motherboard, I've got my memory, I've got my 2 hard drives. Right? So I need a case to put this into. So that'll be our next piece here. I need a case. So let's remove all of this. Oops. Remove. So then under products, we go back to computer parts, go back to desktop cases. And I've always been a big fan of Corsair cases. I didn't go with their memory. I like the look of the G-Skill better. But let's go. So Corsair cases, let's go 4 stars. Let's go with a black case, and let's see what we end up with here, and see what kind of budget case we can get. Like if we think about our budget, we'll put this case on and then go take a look at what we're spending so far. So lowest price. So I want a case that can do RGB. So these first 6 are out of the question. The first 8 are out of the question. So this first one here at $89. This is an RGB tempered glass case. That looks pretty cool. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. So I think if we scroll down, we can see right there's an angular design. So we've got some pretty nice design here. It's got airflow. So I think there's a video. This video here kind of explains it, but the airflow basically it pulls it in here and pushes it out there. So yeah, so that looks pretty nice. Tempered glass side panel, so we can see what's going on. Looks like it's got a case cover for its for the power supply down below here. Looks like I can put a 120 fan here. I think there's also, you can put a 240 across the top, and you can put a 360 down the front. So if I wanted to put a liquid cooling, I've got 3 locations that I could put liquid cooling. Looks like there's 2 hard drive bays down below for full-size hard drives, and then there's 2 SSDs that mount underneath the motherboard, and then they've got filtration built in. So for $80, looks like a pretty solid low cost RGB option. So I went with that one to put my computer together. Right, so as I'm going through this, and I was like, well, shoot, I got to get a power supply. I wonder how much power this is using. I also did, while I was building this. Oh, the other thing I just remembered, right? So as I'm looking at this, right? So if we go back to my motherboard, I need a video card. Like I don't have any video on this thing, and I think the motherboard is going to show that there's some video ports, right? So we go here. Right, there's a display port and an HDMI, right? So, plenty of, and there's my 8 USB 3.2s. So pretty nice. But I think it also said below that you need to have, right, requires a CPU with integrated graphics, right? So then I was like, oh crud, this one, my processor doesn't have integrated graphics, so that's not good. So I did a search real quick, Ryzen 5 with integrated graphics, and they show, right, Ryzen 5 2400G and a Ryzen 3 2200G. Okay, so if you go to Micro Center and you search for computer parts, we can just search it here, right? So Ryzen, what was it, 2400G? So we do a Ryzen 2400G, right? We're not getting anything, and that was what I noticed when I was there, like, what the heck, what's going on? So I went back to this page. It's like, okay, that says 2400G, but then I noticed over here there's a Ryzen 3400G. So I think what happened is this one is the original, this is the replacement, so the 3400G. So I go back over here, and I was like, okay, so 3400G. Are we going to get what I'm looking for? So there we go. So there's the Ryzen 3400G, and wow, it's going to cost me an extra $70. Right, so I'm still on a Ryzen 5. I got a 3400. I've got a graphics. So this one actually includes the Radeon Vega graphics, right? So if we look down here, it's got a Radeon RX Vega graphics, which is, that's decent enough for a home PC for sure, and it can actually play quite a few games. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, if you actually get this, you end up getting they give you so it's got the Wraith spiral cooler on it. The Ryzen's overclockable if you want it. You get I don't know, 3 months of PC Game Pass, right? So you can play Halo or whatever you like to play, that's on Xbox or PC version of those games. So I went ahead and added that one to the cart instead of the 2600. So I got to take that 2600 off. Okay. So if I proceed to the cart, I'm going to take this one off, and let's take a look at what we got. So we've got the X570 Phantom gaming board, got the Trident memory, got the Inland drives 2x2, got the Corsair Carbide Spec Delta case, right? We've got the Ryzen 5 3400G. So that one's a little bit more than I want to spend on the processor, but at this point we're in good shape. Does we have a total price on this sucker? So right up here we're at $649. I need to get a power supply. Okay. So as part of that process, I went out real quick to PC Part Picker, and I've already loaded this to keep the video short, but I put in all the pieces that I ended up buying into the mix. And without this power supply, I needed 169 watts, okay? Which means I can get away with a 500 watt power supply, okay? However, so I was thinking to myself, well, 500 watts, I can get away with that. That's not a problem. But then I was like, well, what happens if I eventually want to put in a CPU cooler, right? So for fun, I just grabbed, like, here's a Corsair. Actually, let's do this one, RGB Platinum. This guy right here. So this one looks like 240. It'll fit on the top of my system. It's got RGB built into it. So if I add that to my computer, now I'm at 184 watts. And then let's say I wanted to come back later on and I wanted to add, say, a killer, like a 5700, right? Radeon. Okay, so if I want to do that, and I've read some articles about the Sapphire being pretty cool. So maybe let's do the Sapphire Nitro. 8 gig, 17, so it's better clock speed, faster boost clock, PCI times 16s. Let's grab this one. So let's just go with this Sapphire just for giggles, right? So just to make sure we have it there and see what it looks like. So now we're at 449. So that makes that 500 kind of touchy, right? So I'd like to have extra, right? So you're supposed to have 30% extra. So extra, 450, 449 plus 30% extra is going to be 637, right? So let's grab a 750. So I think what I ended up deciding to do is go with a 750 based on these numbers, right? So based on seeing this process, that number there. And this is future build, right? Because right now I only need 200. So 500 would be no problem today, but I don't want to go and rip out a power supply and put a new power supply back in later on if I don't have to. So I thought I can get away with a power supply that was, say, 750. So 750, so again, since it is a Corsair case, I went with a Corsair box. I went 4 stars and up, and then I went an 80 plus gold certified. Okay, so that's going to give me a couple different options, right? So there's an RMX, right? So this one looks like it's sold out right now at the Denver store, but it wasn't when I chose it, so we would add that to our mix. So $139.99 is what I need to add to my number. I can't add it right this second, but I would. This is the one I purchased, so a week ago they had them. So if I take $649 and add $139.99, so I'm adding $749 plus $840, so I'm at $790 plus the $10 in tax or so, and that was going to put me right at $800. So I'm right at $800. If I was building this for myself, I'd still need a motherboard or a keyboard and a mouse, and I'd still need a monitor. However, I have all of those things already, so I don't need to purchase those. Okay, so what this gives me for $800 is it gives me an X570 motherboard, which is highly expandable. I can add Ryzen 5s, 7s, or 9s to this board. I only have 16 gigs of memory in it. I can handle 128 gigabytes of memory. It's got PCI 4, so if there's ever, when devices start coming out that can handle PCI 4, they can plop right into this. This motherboard also has some M2 slots on it. So if we zoom this motherboard, you can see right here and right here, there's two M2 slots right there. So underneath all of this, I can actually add additional components. So I can put wireless in this if I wanted to, or I could put a bootable hard drive, some other stuff into this as well. So it gives me lots of expansion. There's one more M2 right over here. Okay, so they got the longer M2s, and then they got a shorter M2. So I've got 3 M2 slots on this thing, plus I have 8 drives that I can put in it, which my case won't handle 8 drives. My case will handle 4 at this point. So the motherboard can outdo what all the other components that I have. I can handle video cards. I could add an extra network interface cards if I wanted to. If I wanted to go with 2.5 gig or 5 gig or 10G network interface cards as well. So pretty nice. Pretty nice setup. $800 is a good price. And for this list of stuff, I actually made these purchases. So I have all of this stuff here in the office at this point. So as soon as we're done with this, we're going to start doing an unboxing video and start taking a look at how we put this together.